Dungeons and Dragons. Satan's Game.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special Halloween Night's the Last Call. That was not supposed to happen, but you know what? Here we are. I thought I was going to be busy tonight. I thought that I'd have a lot going on. Turns out the answer is that no, I do not. I'm going to end the poll here. So 57% of people say that they do not pass out candy on Halloween. So, all right, no costume. No costume. We're long past those days. No, I was pretty much just sitting around here, and I was kind of like, man, I'm kind of bored. So yeah. By the way, Mr. Glicker, I just saw your message. Maybe Steven, maybe if we actually get some people in here or whatever, we end up hanging out or whatever, maybe we can try to zoom you in or something like that. But I don't know if we're going to be on for more than 20, 30 minutes. So let's see what happens. You're bored. You're bored. You've done like 18 streams in the last 2 weeks. You're literally doing 2 weeks straight of streams for this week and next week, and you're bored. Didn't you just tell me that you're always busy? Welcome everybody. Welcome to my life. Yeah, I mean, Halloween used to be a really interesting holiday for me. Growing up, I went trick-or-treating in my neighborhood, and of course, this would have been in the 80s and the 90s, where things were cool. My parents, the idea of trunk-or-treating was an absurd notion. It was more like when we were, I don't know, 6 or 7 or something like that. My mom would walk us around house to house. And then by the time we were 10 or so, it was just, go out and be back before, 9 o'clock or something like that. And we would just go and just, we'd have pillowcases and we'd hit up all the houses and fill that up. And I distinctly remember like the first Halloween I didn't trick or treat. I couldn't drive yet, so I was probably 15. And I remember that's like the one and only time in my life that I was kind of a hoodlum. A couple of my friend and I think some of his, maybe like his cousin or something like that, who is in town, his mom and dad, his aunt and uncle or whatever were visiting with my friend's parents. And we kind of just, we kind of roamed around the streets and, we threw probably like snowballs at people or we, for whatever reason, we had a fire extinguisher and we were just like spraying it off into like, into the middle of the street. So this was like my one time of being a teenage dirtbag. And then after that, Halloween, our good friend Gossamer is here. Says happy Halloween. Thanks for hanging out tonight. Well, thank you for hanging out there, Sarah. Appreciate you. We have some tip goals. They're just kind of mostly for funny effect, but let me know. But thank you, Gossamer. And then I didn't really do anything for Halloween for a long time. Until I got into sort of my mid-20s. And at that time, most of my friends and I had bought homes. But I live in like a development where there's mostly older people. So there was never really any Halloween action going on around here. But then when Aaron bought his house, first house that he bought was this old Victorian looking mansion on a huge lot on the lake. His house literally looked like a haunted house. And, by crook and by nook, Aaron ended up putting just a ton of money into his Halloween decorations. And of course, this is Mr. Aaron Smith we're talking about. So he did not, mess around, and he bought like the king-sized candy bars. So naturally, and of course he was doing this in a part of the town where there were a lot of families, a lot of young families. So there was just a ton of kids. And of course his house became, had this reputation for being the house with the really, really good candy. So as we sort of, built this up over the couple of years, Aaron kept spending more and more money. You know, the quality of the house became more and more intense. You know, I'm not just talking about like, oh, you know, it's a cartoon spider. No, he had like, you know, mannequins of women, you know, with young girls with crazy eyes, blood coming out of their mouths, and, you know, moving things in the shadows. And he had a big yard, so you kind of had to walk right from the sidewalk up to the house to get the good candy. And it kind of became like a gauntlet. And me and my friends would come over there early. We'd dress up, and we would basically play Halloween, our haunted house in the yard and around the porch. And we would jump out and we would scare little kids. And, you know, we wanted them to have to earn those king size candy bars. And then after Halloween, you know, after the trick or treating was over, we would all go inside and we'd have our party, you know, which was mostly just playing board games. Let's be clear. But what's really funny is, at some point around this time frame, Aaron ended up, meeting his now wife, and they got engaged or whatever. And she was living with him. And she ended up kind of operating because all the little kids, the younger brothers, the younger sisters, or even just the young kids, they would be too afraid. You know, they would try to make it through our haunted yard of terror, and they would fail. They'd come running out. So on the street, on the sidewalk, there was a small little table where Aaron's fiance, now wife, would sort of set up shop, and she had like the fun-sized bars, right? And it was kind of like that. That was like that was like the consolation prize candy. And if the kids wanted to get the sick king size bars, they had to go through the gauntlet. And we, you know, it was a very, very, you know, Bob says, don't forget about the Halloween player agency. Exactly. Because you had a choice, right? You could take the low risk, low reward option and just take your fun sized bar and move on your way. Or you could brave the gauntlet of scary props and spooky music. And of course, you know, people dressed as scary creatures jumping out from bushes and behind things and coming out of leaf piles to, you know, scare and grab at you. But what was really, really fun. Now, I didn't know any of these kids personally, so it was more like you'd see each year that there would be kids who had been coming to the house for years. And, you know, you could see themselves psyching themselves up. And sometimes you could overhear the parents, you know, talking to, Aaron's wife and being like, oh, this is the year she says she's going to do it this year. She says she's going to make it. She said, you know, last year her brother did it. And so now this year she's going to do it, you know, and you'd see them there because for them, this house was like this legendary house on the street. And, you know, for this, you know, 7 or 8 year old kid, it was like, can I do this? You know, and it was like, for them, it was like going into the dungeon, right? They wanted that, you know, huge pile of gold. They just had to beat the monsters. And sometimes, you know, they'd make it through, and the look of sort of satisfaction of winning when they got to the sort of grand cauldron. And usually we could tell if it was if a kid's first time, that making it up there, because they'd be so proud. And we would usually, you know, they'd give them like 3 or 4 king size candy bars. So it was like a, you know, jackpot to a young kid. That was just an absolute, blast. It was just a ton of fun. And we did that through most of our, 20s into sort of our early 30s. And, then Aaron started having kids of himself. So Halloween became more about the kids. But, ever since then, I really haven't done anything because, quite frankly, it's just not as fun. You know, that whole time of my life made Halloween a really, really fun experience. And I really, really do miss that sometimes. So, pretty cool. We had a super chat from our friend, Great Role Playing Debbie, who says, whatever Derek says, I disagree. Well, I just told a personal anecdotal story. I don't know that I was trying to make a point, but hey, it is what it is. Let's see here. Hopefully everybody has sort of gotten their remastered PDFs. I think most people have started to get them now. As a reminder, I will be on Roll for Combat stream tomorrow to talk about the cleric. There's a little bit more to talk about on the cleric than there was the bard. But all in all, yeah, I think it's pretty good. Frostjack tipping $10. I wouldn't. I wouldn't. He's referring, of course, to the tip goals, which, as I said, are kind of a funny thing. It says, I wouldn't want to subject you to an ASR remastered. I have a much better alternative. How about all 4th edition powers ranked? That would take an insane amount of time, even more than all spells ranked. Actually, I don't know. All spells ranked, when we did it, I think there was over 800 or 900 spells. And of course, I didn't do all the cantrips. I didn't do any of the cantrips. I didn't do any of the focus spells. And of course, there have been like 3 or 4 books that have come out since we did all spells ranked. So there's probably over 1,000, maybe even over 1,200 spells. There are, and I just pulled up the sort of the 4E Archives of Nethys. There are 9,409 4th edition powers. So no. To be clear, when I say all spells ranked remastered, this would be spells that, significantly changed, that had a meaningful update, not just a simple names change, but an actual, sort of adjustment. Sweet. Welcome, Casey. Glad to have you on there. I don't know, Bob. A couple of people were saying that they didn't want me on there unless I was going to be nice. Here's the thing. Here's the thing. If you're a professional in any sort of setting and someone has critique, especially if you're a professional in a creative space, you have to be willing to accept criticism. Now, I agree. Personal attacks or attacking someone's, the person themselves, that is, not acceptable. And I never do that. And I never would do that. But if somebody makes a bad book or somebody makes a bad rule or somebody makes a boring monster, I'm going to say that. And that is not there. You should not feel like that is an attack. You should not feel like that is even close to anything representing disrespect for that person. Some of it, of course, is subjective, right? In the sense that, to me, this isn't a cool, feat or class or monster or whatever. But, there's a degree of objectivity in it, too. I like to think that at a certain point, people who have been around the game long enough have a certain amount of understanding of what works and what doesn't work. And, one of the reasons I love Mark Seifter is because, you heard him, you heard him today and in the past couple of days saying, I think he's like, I messed up on Wall of Stone. That spell is too strong. And he's like, basically saying, I can't believe they didn't nerf it, which they didn't. So, again, that is sort of where I kind of stand in that respect. I'm not trying to upset anybody. I'm not trying to disrupt anybody's lives. I'm just saying I can be critical. And if other people aren't critical, it's either because, number one, they, quite frankly, positivity sells and they're trying to run a business and or maybe they're trying to be in good graces with the powers that be and they don't want to sort of, bite the hand that feeds. Number two, it could be because they don't have enough of perspective, right, to understand, what it is that they're looking at here and what the game could be. An analogy that I sort of used to use is it's like when people talk about role-playing games and people talk about especially people coming from that 5e Pathfinder 2 sort of ingrained D20 mindset. I said, growing up in my house, we always had apples. Okay. And I loved them. If you asked me, do I like apples? I would say, of course, I love apples. And when you went to school and you got an apple, I loved apples. At home, we always had apples, right? And I didn't even really understand. I'm talking about even like through my teenage years, right? There was only 2 apples. There were the green ones and the red ones. And red one meant, right, meant red delicious. And I legitimately liked red delicious apples. because in my experience of apples was just the tart green ones, which I like, but weren't my favorite. And then the not tart red ones, which were the Red Delicious. And my family, that's all they ate. That's all my school had. And so the only what I knew as apple was Red Delicious and Granny Smith. And then at some point in my life, I became exposed to other apples, right? I became exposed to, Galas and Pink Ladies and Brayburns and Macintoshes and, the new ones like the Honey Crisp and the even better Cosmic Crisp. And I realized, that Red Delicious apple is shit. That Red Delicious apple is anything other than delicious, actually. It's a mealy, grimy apple. It has minimal flavor. It has just a horrible amount of crunch. And it's just not a good apple. But that doesn't mean I didn't love it as a kid. Of course I loved it as a kid. It doesn't invalidate. Now that I look back on it and it said, you couldn't really pay me to eat a Red Delicious apple. But that doesn't mean that as a kid or as a teenager, when I liked them, that I was I was flawed or I was mistaken. And to be fair, if I met somebody and they really liked Red Delicious apples, I would say great for them. But I would also wonder, have you tried a Cosmic Crisp? Okay. Have you tried, a Brayburn or Pink Lady? Because I'm going to tell you, once you have, you may not like your Red Delicious anymore, or you may go back, in which case I respect your decision. I don't care what kind of apple you eat. But all I'm saying is, when I think about that in terms of context of gaming, I think that there are not really that many uses where I would ever eat a Red Delicious apple. I understand that there are better apples out there because I was exposed to them. I tried them and I like them a lot better. And an interesting counterpoint, which I've used to this before, is also the cheese argument, because the cheese argument or the cheese metaphor brings in an additional concept, which is this. Growing up, I liked cheese, but as a kid, cheese just meant one thing. Cheese meant American cheese, right? Overprocessed American cheese. And as a kid, I liked cheese. And then I grew up and I discovered that, there were things out there like Munster and Swiss and Pepper Jack and Gruyere and just all these other incredible, amazing cheeses, which are, and not to mention mozzarella, Parmesan. So all of those things were much, much, much better than American cheese, 100%. But the difference is, while I will never go and use a Red Delicious apple for anything, I will sometimes use American cheese. And why? Because you know what? And if you ask even like chefs, I see this all the time on Food Network, they'll say American cheese is the best kind of cheese for putting on a burger or a grilled cheese sandwich because it melts without splitting. And the reason why it melts without splitting is, of course, because it's a Franken cheese. It's got oils in there. It's not a real, it's made of cheese products, but it's not like a cheese in the traditional sense. But there are culinary uses where even a top chef would say American cheese is the best cheese to use because it fits in that particular role. And so while I will not, just go out of my way to eat or use American cheese, I will also use American cheese for certain applications where I think it is expressly purposed and designed. Whereas with a Red Delicious, I'm not going to use that in a pie. I'm not going to use that in a crisp. I'm not going to use that in a salad. I'm not going to use that as an eating out of hand apple, right? For me, the Red Delicious there's no point to it. Why would I use this game? Why would I use this apple? Whereas the American cheese is, okay, yes, there are much better cheeses out there, but there are some instances where I will prefer American cheese. Roll for Combat says the menu. Janka says, I love the menu restaurants. Yes, they did say that in the menu. But if you go I think it was like last year or something like that. Bobby Flay, who, is obviously, Iron Chef America. Bobby Flay has said many times on his various programs that the best cheese for a burger is American cheese. Oh yeah, I told you this is a weird stream. Anyways, the point I was trying to make is, I get that some people are very defensive of their Red Delicious. And when I'm trying to tell them about how bad their Red Delicious tastes and how there are so much better apples out there, it can come across as me being very negative, right? It comes across as me being very gatekeepy, and it comes across as me being very, mean, I guess. But the fact of the matter is, I just want them to fully enjoy their apple eating experience, John, take care. While Cosmic Crisp is incredible and it's probably my favorite right now, the Pink Lady will be forever in my heart as probably my favorite apple. But I refuse to eat them out of season. So, of course it does. Gal apple and cheese needs some bacon and bread, and we've got ourselves a nice sandwich. Gala is about the bottom barrel for me. I won't eat a Red Delicious. I will eat a Gala, but not if I have any other choice. So yeah. Not that Gala is just not doesn't have enough flavor. I want that punch. Gala apples are not great. So anyways, I don't remember why we're all apples ranked. Cosmic Crisp is right here. The OG Honey Crisps were right here, but the new Honey Crisps are down here because Honey Crisps have gotten sort of bred. They've sort of been enshittified, and so they've just kind of gotten taken out. So Fuji's, I don't really like to eat out of hand, but I do like them in apple pie. They're a firm apple that hold up pretty well, even throughout the baking process. So I do like Fuji's, but not for really out of hand eating, but in a pie, I think they're fantastic. Of course, the best apple pies use a variety of apples so that you can get this nice layer texture. Actually, here in Northeast Ohio, because of the lake and because of our soil, there's actually kind of a weird microclimate, and we grow grapes here. There's actually a lot of wineries in Northeast Ohio, but we also have a lot of apple trees and a lot of apple orchards. So there's actually a lot of apples available locally here in our region. I'd say less than 10 minutes from my house, there's like at least 3 major orchards. So, so explain to me why I'm personally attacking apple farmers by being honest about the variance. Again, like I could totally buy that you like eating your Red Delicious apple. But if I find it hard to believe though, that's what I'm trying to say. It's all I'm trying to say. Like, I get it. There's a subjectivity to taste. I think we can all agree on that, right? Clearly, none of us agree what the best apple is. Some people are saying Cosmic Crisp. Some people are saying Fuji. Some people are saying Gala. But like, nobody is saying Red Delicious. So, I do think that there's a point where people can go and get too far off the, they miss the boat. Anyways, if you're wondering why we're talking about apples and cheese and Halloween stories, it's because this stream has no point. Right. We can all agree on which is the worst. That is true. But yeah, I mean, I think that's why this stream didn't say anything about RPGs or anything like that. Yeah, no. Yeah, Hannah, absolutely. Red Delicious. Like, see, this is where you could say it's subjective. No, it's not. Red Delicious apples are just the worst apples ever. Like, even like experts will tell you this thing was not designed for taste. It was designed for shippability and shelf life, right? Self-confessed cynic. Yes. I mean, for those of you who didn't have the metaphor hitting you completely over the head, yes, the apples are like game systems. That is correct. But there's sort of an extension to the metaphor here. There's a lot of people who have not had a Cosmic Crisp apple. There's a lot of people who have never had a Macintosh or a Fuji or a Pink Lady, but we've all had a Red Delicious, right? So we've all had, we can all kind of relate to that experience. It is our friend the Fath. It is our friend the Fathpinders. Well, we had a big vote with the Patreon, and Fabula Ultima definitely pulled out ahead. There was a lot of interest from it. And of course, the game designer, like Stephen Glicker from Roll for Combat, is one of like 2 or 3 people in the industry who actually kind of like us. I think Fabula Ultima is just a delicious system. I think it does an excellent job of merging a lot of game mechanics that I find really compelling into one. And I think it could be really fun to watch from home. Because again, one of the things that we've discovered here at Night's Last Call is, look, I like to think that I'm a pretty good GM, and I like to think that my players are fun. But the fact of the matter is, right, we're no Critical Role, right? We're no Dimension 20. Those people are, number one, they're paid very, very well. And I imagine if me and my players were getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to play D&D, we might go the extra mile. A lot of times my players are like coming straight from work, or straight from a kid that's sick, and they've got to get home before, before the kids, because the kids are going crazy, and, their wife is losing her mind trying to keep the kids from destroying the house. So there's a lot of extraneous things going on. But so again, we can't really compete in the sort of, theater department, but because we're small enough and because we've sort of integrated the technology, I really, really like when our chat and our people who are observing our game have an opportunity to sort of interact with us and, vote with their dollar and have fun little tip goals that can meaningfully change the game. And I think Fabula Ultima also would work pretty well in that regard. So yeah, I think Fabula Ultima is a good choice. On a personal note, we've really been bandying around the idea of playing 4th edition because Bob's never played it. And, I think it'd be a really fun experience and sort of dig into that tactical game. Obviously, the remaster just came out this week. I'm sure we're going to get to that eventually, although there's part of me that kind of wants to wait until the Core 2 comes out, because I just want to be able to see everything. Ooh. Ben, our friend, would love to see a first look of Usagi Yojimbo 2nd edition. That has been on my obsessed with Legend of the Five Rings, want to look at other ways to integrate drama systems from samurai drama into a gaming list for a long time. So Ben, I'm going to probably add that to the list because I really do think that I still think that genre is really exciting, and I really would like to look at how other games do it besides Legend of the Five Rings. So, yeah, thank you, Ben. So, also thank you for the tip towards literally anything else. Let's see, what else do we got here? If I missed your chat, I'm sorry. Let's see. Josh, are there audio only versions of the streams or videos? One of the guys in my groups has been listening to the content while working, but the video is killing the battery on his phone. Joshua, unfortunately, no. Our streams are kind of long. Like, here, to be completely transparent, what I could do is, as soon as the stream is over, I could go to YouTube, I could download the audio or download the video. I could then take the video, load it into Adobe Premiere Pro, cut out the video, extract the audio, trim off the beginning and the end to make it, 2 or 3 hours, then export that as an MP3, and then upload that MP3 to our podcasting service. But our podcasting service is completely demonetized. So, we make absolutely no money for that. So I love the idea of doing it, but it is literally like an extra 15 to 20 or 30 minutes after a stream that I would have to do on top of, the 3 or 4 hours I just streamed for. And I don't know that there's enough of an audience there for it to be worth my while. I get these comments all the time, and to anybody who is listening, I totally understand it, and I totally get it, and I totally respect it. In fact, I really miss the podcast in some ways, because it was easy to do and it was very, sort of, but it was also pretty unstructured, which, had its own problems. But it was a fun experience. So that is the answer, Joshua. I'm sorry. Let's see. Omniscient Toad. Well, welcome Halloween. Watching an L5R game. The problem with an L5R game, and I'm just being honest here, is, it's a Legend of the Five Rings game. I think things, I don't shy away from adult concepts, like seppuku, suicide, class, caste distinctions, certain elements of maybe that culture that could feel like they're being appropriated, because I actually really want to lean into those concepts, and I don't want anybody getting upset that I'm not respecting, Shinto or Buddhism or something else that the game sort of takes a sort of white Americanized version of. And so truth be told, I think that there is a lot of potential difficulties that could come from running a Legend of the Five Rings game. So, the USA publication is sold out on 5e Ultima. Emmanuel's been crushing it. And rightfully so. He's just doing so well, and he deserves all the success. He's very, very, very good when it comes to this. Let's see here. All spells ranks remastered. Let's go. All right, but and then Boothby comes in with an anti $2 in chat just to counteract the $2 super chat. So, to be clear though, if I did redo them, I would use a different system of rating. We would still use S tier for broken and stuff like that, but I've thought of a couple different options that we would do when we would go through there. But if we do it, which again, this, by the way, that goal isn't even to do it. Okay. It's to consider doing it. All right. Cause that's a lot of things. And yes, Boothby, we are definitely still owed a Call of Cthulhu play. Again, because it's a system that none of us have ever played and none of us have ever run. It just we weren't able to get it all organized and set up. And, ideally, like the most awesome, amazing thing would be to have Ben run it or something like that. But, we just didn't get anything, on our end, we didn't get everything set up in time for that. And, so, maybe we'll do one in the dead of winter, and we can do some sort of, weird Call of Cthulhu, the Thing type Arctic death. I don't know, something, but we are going to do it. And quite frankly, I'm legitimately curious about it, because I do think that I've learned a lot about sort of the D100 systems that have come out of Chaosium and, that sort of basic fantasy system as we've gone through the Mythras streams and the Against the Dark Master streams, and now the Call of Cthulhu streams. And I've got Pendragon over here, and, I'm legitimately curious. I'm legitimately interested. Usagi. Yeah. Usagi. It's not Usagi. I think it's Usagi, not Usagi. I think the I is pronounced as an E. Usagi. Oh, maybe I'm wrong. Yeah. Yes. Usagi. Not Usagi. So I would say it's pronounced. I'm being told no. I'll listen. I do not speak Japanese, so by all means, please correct. I'm pretty sure the answer is no, but is there any way to get the remastered PDS if you don't have a subscription? Corel, the answer is no. Unfortunately, that is just the way that they do things. And while they go out to the subscribers only when your book ships, I think everybody else is going to have to wait till November 15th. I'm not sure when Archives of Nethys will be updated. Usually they're updated sometimes a couple days before the street date of the books. I've seen that before. So you might see it as, soon as a week and a half, but yeah. All right. So, okay. Yes, soft G, like GIF. Well, GIF is a hard G. G versus G. I see. So it's U sa G. Oh no, you're saying G like giddy up. G that G and G. I don't know. Maybe those seem like different pronunciations to me. Look, I'm not the best at this. Okay. So any case, that is kind of the answer to that. But overall, yeah, I think, but but even mispronounced, I would like to see what Derek thinks of the game. Yeah. So, yeah, you can get the PDFs. You just can't get them early. Japanese is one of the easiest languages to pronounce, dude. You must be trolling us. I can't. Are you trolling me? Like as an example, okay, for many years, this item, okay, which came out in Kamigawa block in Magic the Gathering, 50% of the people I meet will call this Umazawa's Jite, and the other 50% of people I meet will call this Umazawa's Jeet. So, clearly there's a lot of disagreement, at least amongst English how to pronounce it. Anyways. Okay, he's trolling. All right. I mean, I won't even lie. Because I don't watch anime. The only way I know how to pronounce anything is because of Legend of the Five Rings stuff. So, and that is also very accurate. Iomade, Iamade, Iamududi, Iamadadamadadibade, Iomade, Iomade. See, it works. Wyvern. I like that I wasn't still accurate. I am a day did we. Yeah, that's my preferred pronunciation of that. But switching tack here for a moment. I'm going through a little bit of a crisis of faith, you might call it. Crisis of belief. And it's really about self-discovery. It's really about self-expression, because I have really had a hard time trying to figure out what role-playing game I want to play. And I understand, I've come to the realization a long time ago that the truth of the matter is that I like, different things. And sometimes I like those things, roughly at the same time, right? Sometimes I want an RPG experience that's crunchy and crispy, very dry. And other times I want an RPG experience that's very, rich and decadent and very, moist. Like, the difference between like a brownie versus a cracker. And the fact of the matter is, it's very hard to combine those things together. But, pie exists, and pie kind of has that crispy, crunchy, flaky crust, and it also has that nice, rich, ooey gooey center. So clearly there is this idea of things that can be combined. And so there's always this desire to try to find that magical system that can do it justice. A s'more, basically. Correct, D Priest. But I also know that it's sort of a fool's goal, right? Which is to try to, number one, something that I have criticized on this channel before is some of these new games, which take usually a crunchy tactical combat system. I'll use kind of PF2 terms here. They'll use a very crunchy encounter system and then they'll use a very narrative exploration system, right? And they just smash it together. And they say, that's good enough for us. Because now we have this kind of almost like, it's like two games in one. You open up the box of the game, and there's just two boxes nested inside. One set of rules and mechanics are for this type of encounter, and the other types of boxes, basically a different game for different types of the encounter. And I don't like that design. I don't like the way that is. I don't like the way that is structured. And so, there are examples where people do figure out a way to harmoniously blend these mechanics, and those I think Fabula Ultima is one of those games. And those really do interest me. It's one of the reasons why it kind of jumps out to me. But I've been having a hard time because I realize that, and I said this in Discord the other day, which is I realize that I, as a GM, when we were playing that Dread, actually, it came to me while I was watching us play the Dread in the Dark and Dragons game, which we filmed a couple weeks ago. But we were watching it. We premiered it yesterday for the general audience. And I was watching it and I realized I am at my happiest as a game master. I feel like I'm at my best as a game master when I am able to make rulings and make stuff up and sort of just fly off the cuff. But I also realize that when I play a game that has no structure and has no, I don't know how to call it, no depth, I get bored very quickly. Like, it's kind of like if I'm making up everything all the time, then suddenly it doesn't feel like the world doesn't have any stability. The world doesn't have any sort of grip or texture to it. Everything is just very, very loosey-goosey. And I feel like that can start to sort of shake the boundaries of the world. And there's like some complicated explanations to this, which I can get into if we really want to get more into that metaphor, because I've experienced this in different game systems. But when I play a game system that has structure and has rules, right? Which I just said, I feel like the games lack that, kind of, bore me. The problem is I'm not going to ignore those. Those rules and those concepts and those procedures exist in that game set. Of course I could ignore them. I'm not an idiot. But if I'm ignoring them, why do I have them? Right? Why do I have all of these feats and all of these powers? If I'm playing a 4th edition game, if I'm just going to make stuff up and, go to page 42 in the DMG and be like, oh yeah, cool. You channel the energy of your soul into your staff and it explodes in a brilliant aura of white light, doing radiant damage to all the undead around you. It's like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. But you're like, why, if I could just do that whenever I want to do that, then why do I care what powers, I pick? Because that is part of the game, right? So it's kind of it's a very complicated thing, I think, to make, for me at least, to make people understand about why this is a problem for me. Because in the past, when we were, playing role-playing games, there would always come a moment where somebody would certainly, try to do something that is sort of not covered in the rules, right? That you're going to have to make a ruling for, or that is clearly in violation of the rules, but is just going for some sort of effect. And the problem is that games that don't have any of this structure to support that, you could say, sure, yeah, you could do that. And a lot of times, you're like, oh, I'll make it harder, right? I'll make the DC tougher. I'll make it take more actions, right? I hear this all the time about Pathfinder 2. Well, just let them do something that they don't have, but make it cost more actions, or, make it do less damage. Okay. But you understand that you're disincentivizing that behavior. Then you're actively telling your players, don't be creative. Don't think out of the box. because I'm punishing you for it. I'm penalizing you with action, basically I'm telling you, just use the feats that are written on your character sheet, right? Because you're going to get more action efficient, or you're going to get more damage, you're going to get more efficacy out of it, right? It doesn't seem like, it feels like I'm giving them a reward, right? But I'm not. I'm actually creating a situation where I am actively discouraging that behavior, because now people are going to go, and I mean, as an example, Unfortunate Pumpkins here. There's a couple super chats I want to get to, but Unfortunate Pumpkin was talking about like page 42 in the 4th edition DMG, and he's right. He's like, oh, this is great. It's got all these damage expressions for coming up with stuff on the fly. He's right, but there's rules in there, and there's concepts and ideas where it basically says just make sure that these don't do as much damage as a power does. It's like, okay, so then why would I ever do one of these things, right? Like as an example, you're fighting in, the evil king's antechamber against 4 of his elite, knight guards. And there's a brazier, right? Like, a stand, a metal stand with a big, cauldron of coals that's burning, providing illumination. And you have this cool idea of kicking the brazier down and, doing like an AoE of damage. And depending on what game system you're playing, what kind of GM you're playing, and the GM might say, no, you can't do that. But, 4th edition D&D, to its credit, does say, yeah, that's actually something pretty cool. And here is a set of rules that can help you adjudicate that and come up with something like what the damage should be. And that's great. But when you look at what that damage should be, it basically comes back and it says, this is actually not an ideal move for you. You would just be better off attacking with your sword. You would just be better off using the power or the feat that is written on your sheet, okay? Because it's going to do more damage. And that to me is a perverse incentive. I don't want characters to be punished for being cool, right? So I that's kind of where I run into this issue when people come up with these concepts of like, oh, you could just, somebody wants to do something in Pathfinder 2, but they don't have the feat for it. Let them do it. Just make the DC higher. Okay, so they fail more often. Make it cost more actions, so it's less. So it's an even worse action than it already might have been. And you're basically telling the person, just don't take this action. And I kind of want to do the opposite of it, right? Like, isn't the player who's engaged and coming up with creative solutions and really thinking in the game and being aware of sort of what's going on, and I'm going to use the brazier. I'm going to think like this is a movie, rather than someone who's just, looking straight down at their character sheet and just, okay, I'll do this feat, I'll do this power, right? Shouldn't I be rewarding that player? The problem is, this is where I was going to before, when you start doing that game. Okay, so as an example, we used to play a lot of Mutants and Masterminds, okay, which is a D20-based superhero game, and it has an extensive system of points that you can use to buy and build pretty much any superhero you can imagine. Every power that you could ever imagine is in the book, and it has a different point cost, and you have to buy so many ranks of that power to make it, if I buy more ranks of flight, I can move faster, right? But flight costs more points per rank than, say, land-based super speed. Land-based super speed is only 1 point per rank. Flying is 2 points per rank, right? So there's like this cost differential and all this stuff. And the whole game has all of these like points accounting. But Mutants and Masterminds, being a superhero game, also has hero points. And you get a lot of these, much more than you would in Pathfinder 2. You get hero points in Mutants and Masterminds, oh no, the bus full of school children is on the bridge and the bridge is, starting to collapse. Here's a hero point. Oh no, you're in love with the reporter guy and he shows up on the scene. Oh no, he's going to be taken as a hostage. Here's a hero point, right? So players have a lot of these hero points, but then you're playing this game and then you have these hero points, and the hero points give you a lot of narrative leeway and they give you a lot of power leeway. And you could basically spend a hero point to kind of make shit up. And when that happens, what ends up happening is nothing feels like it means anything. Because you're like, look, no matter what happens in this scenario, I'm just going to make some bullshit up that will be really effective and work for us. And here's my hero point. And that creates the opposite problem, right? Where suddenly I'm allowing my players to create these really creative solutions. They're engaged with everything. But really what it kind of feels like it's coming down to is it's like they always have the silver bullet, right? They always have the right tool at the right time to do the right, thing, because you've given them so much leeway and you've encouraged that so much that now the game, I don't know, the game part of it, I guess, sort of falls apart. And suddenly it just feels like we're kind of getting to a what are we even doing here part. Kind of feels like we're just starting to tell a story, because the dice and the choices and everything that you've made a decision about on your character sheet doesn't really matter anymore. Now, obviously, Mutants and Masterminds is still really fun, but I played several campaigns in 1st edition, 2nd edition, and 3rd edition Mutants and Masterminds. So clearly, I like the game, but it always had this problem where it felt like at a certain point, I don't want players looking at their character sheet for every action, but I also don't want players to never look at their character sheet or to be like, whatever's written on my character sheet doesn't matter. I'll just come up with something cool that can get us out of this situation. Don't worry. I'm a creative player. I'm a smart player. I'm an engaged player. And I'm going to say something that'll sound cool and it'll get us out of the situation. All right. Let me answer some super chats here. Unfortunate Pumpkin says, easy, quick, and dirty Japanese pronunciation. O. Why would you put it in that order? Why wouldn't you put A-E-I-O-U? Anyways, it's such a weird way to pronunciation order. Yes, this is a pronunciation guide they give you in the Legend of the Five Rings book as well. Thank you. We had a super chat from our good friend. I think Save Versus had a super chat. There it is. All right. In between TTRPG campaigns, have you guys considered a one-off board game, like a co-op adventure or something? Save Versus. Over the years, we've played different, specifically, usually dungeon-based co-op adventure games. We've done Gloomhaven campaigns. We've done Descent, Journeys into the Dark. I don't really like video games too much, but sometimes there was a group campaign of like Divinity, Original Sin. I wasn't really a part of that because I'm not a big video game player. So yeah, I mean, we definitely will bust out a board game or a co-op board game from time to time. Not everybody in general, the group isn't as into board games as they are into role-playing games. I kind of have a different group of board gamers, and then they tend to not like, those kind of games. Like they like, hardcore heavyweight, Uwe Rosenberg or, Rainer Knizia type board games. So, but we've done that. We've definitely done that. Dr. Waits with $10. My group jammed a folding boat up the behind of a dragon. I told them it would work one time. I love creativity. I just don't want them repeating that every time. It's the easiest way to kill a dragon. And yeah, I think that, that in a sense that is kind of accurate, right? Like where, right. You don't want people to have sort of a free lunch, right? But you also don't want to, but you also want to reward them for their clever behavior. And my experience is just a lot of games, I think that struggle in that space. And I'm not going to go to the whiteboard, but, part of the reason why I always like Blaze in the Dark. There's a lot of reasons why I don't like Blaze in the Dark. Oh, and one of them is, it is fun sometimes to have tactical combats, right? And to have movement. Round based and round based, or everybody gets a turn in an initiative order. But one of the reasons I like Blaze in the Dark so much is because it provides not less of a rules frame, less of a set of rules, and more of a set of principles about how you convert basically anything into a structured product. So what do I mean by that? So Blaze in the Dark, right, has this basic concept of position and effect that sort of damn it, I am going to go to this. I'm going to go to the whiteboard. All right, we're going to the whiteboard. I apologize. All right. I don't even remember which one of these is my whiteboard. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, whiteboard hype. All right. All right. Whiteboard hype. Here we go. All right. So my it's not plugged in. All right. Now our whiteboard is plugged in. Here we go. All right, we're ready to go. Now, so the basic idea of what I was trying to say here is you have in Blades in the Dark. Okay, so the idea here is that you have this. Oh, hey, we just had a $10 anonymous tip. $10 anonymous tip. Said Whiteboard. I don't know who that was, but I appreciate it. Thank you so much. So what I'm trying to basically say here is you have this sort of amorphous blob, right? Of possible actions, or events, or, kind of things or concepts that might happen at your RPG table, right? So this might be, this might be the, oh, that got cut off there. There we go. This might be the, party saying that they want to shove a folding boat, right, up a dragon's behind, as Dr. Waits so elegantly put it a little while ago, right? So this could be, anything. This could be, I want to blow up the bridge while the enemy forces are crossing it, right? So there's just basically anything in the world that you could, do. And there are some games which try to create sort of a rule set which maps most, if not all, of these possible actions and events, okay, to a set of, prescriptive rules, right? In other words, if you do this action, then the rule says you do this. If you A, then you A. And if you B, then you B. And obviously, no matter what rule set you have. Now, of course, in a most basic concept, right? So, for example, this could be, hey, I'm going to climb up this mountain, or I'm going to climb up this stone wall, right? And this is where it's like, okay, we know that we have rules for climbing. And this is where, the depth and complexity of those rules for climbing can vary. You might have some rules that are pretty shallow. You could have other rules that are very, very, very deep. And there's a lot of rules for climbing with, varying DCs for different types of stone and different types of structures and all this other stuff. And then you might have an entire game complex that is built on climbing. And so you might have, feats or powers or other game mechanics, which all point to this sort of singular action or interaction in the game space. So And, you know, I think that's how most D20 games are built. The problem with this is, it's not necessarily a problem, is number one, is that no set of rules is ever going to be comprehensive enough to handle all of this. But more importantly, it kind of gets back to what I was talking about before. If somebody has, you know, feats and powers and other things invested into doing a certain type of action, then it only makes sense that they are going to sort of want to use that action to do that action. And they're not going to necessarily want you making things up on the fly, because the reason that they invested mechanical concepts into Climb is because they wanted to be rewarded for making those choices. Right. And so, you know, this kind of works fine until you come up with someone who says, right, I want to, I want to strap a bunch of alchemical items together in a bundle, a bunch of alchemist fires and black tendril shots and lightning bombs, right? And I want to stick it in a barrel, and I want to, pretend it's wine and take it into the guard station, and then we'll have this cool heist moment to blow it up, right? To blow up the barrel. And this is where you run into your problem, because your first problem, I should say, is because the first problem is because there is already a rule for blowing things up. That rule exists, and it has defined parameters, and there might be feats and powers and actions that all interact with that in a way that, matter to the outcome of the game. And the fact of the matter is, I don't really care about that, right? What my natural inclination is I wish that these rules weren't here. I wish that there was nothing getting in my way, right? I don't want a rule set, right, at all. What I want is my pen to start working. Okay. There we go. So I don't want a rule set at all, right? What I want is guidelines, okay? What I want are guidelines, not rules, okay? We had a $5 super chat from Unfortunate Pumpkin. I completely agree that 4E isn't immune to this issue. It will never feel as strong as just using a power. I'm just glad it's spelled out clearly. Yes. I mean, they say, look, here is a way to do what you want to do. In the case of what, Pumpkin's talking about, basically, in 4E, there is a bunch of rules, right? There's an entire rule set that maps different actions to different outcomes and different ways of interacting with the rules, usually a D20 roll. And then they have a set of guidelines, right? That's the page 42 stuff. And the guidelines give you, as it says, a bunch of, suggestions about how you might, and these are more loosely defined than the hard rules. But it still has this caveat, which is that these options here, necessarily should be inferior to these options here, because otherwise what's the point of playing this game of 4th edition where, you should be excited to take and use the powers that your character has on their sheet. So what I want, rather than a set of rules, is, as I said before, is a set of guidelines, or you might call them a set of principles. So the analogy that I like to make here is the difference between a book, a recipe book, okay, and a cooking book. Now, I own both of these, or both these types of books. So what is the difference? Okay. A recipe book isn't really interested in teaching you how to cook or bake. It is simply giving you a way to map a desire. I want chocolate chip cookies, right? And then it says, follow these steps. And then it says, and here's your outcome, right? Here's your chocolate chip cookies. This is essentially a set of rules for how to make, fudge brownies or chocolate chip cookies or sugar cookies, right? Here's how you'd use the ingredients in your kitchen to make what you want to make. Recipe books are like rules. They say, here's how you use the things in your game to create an outcome. A cooking book, on the other hand, actually teaches you, right, how to bake or cook, right? It may have recipes in it, but they're almost more as an example, right? A cooking a cooking book, it's gonna teach you about what flour does in a baking recipe, right? What sugar and egg do, why you have them, why do you need this much flour and this much sugar and this much egg? What would happen if you took out the egg? Would that create problems? I want my cookie to be sweeter. Can I just add sugar? Will that have other effects? Will that create problems? Will the cookie be different? And the answer is yes. It won't just be more sweet. It'll also be structurally a different cookie. So a cooking book is obviously not as appealing, right? The truth of the matter is most people don't want to learn how to cook, right? They just want to follow the recipe because they don't care about the process. They just care about the final product. They just care about having something to eat. But what it does is it makes them beholden. It makes them reliant. It makes them slaves to the recipe book because they don't know how to cook, right? There's an example that I mean, this is me being a little mean because it doesn't seem like it's, am I very hungry? No, I am not. I had Jersey Mike's earlier today and that's a big sub. And for me, I think about the great Food Network TV shows, right? Like, Iron Chef is the classic example, right? In Iron Chef, these people literally go in there. They don't have recipe books. They don't even know what ingredients they're going to be given. They have no idea what the challenge will be, but they know enough and how to use different ingredients to get an outcome that perfectly matches what they need it to do. All right. So when I think about a set of principles, what I like is this idea of my players, my game, right, can generate any kind of outcome or action or desire in the game. And instead of just me winging it, or instead of me coming up with a ruling that might conflict or conflate with other rules that already exist in the game, I prefer to have a set of principles or guidelines that allow me to convert any desire or action or event, right, into, so this is like a conversion. This is like me being the Iron Chef, right, with the mystery ingredient. And I am going to be able to take this game action that a player or a group of players wants to take, and I can convert it into, ideally, an interesting, okay, and fun mechanical outcome. So, this is what I want right, my RPG to do. And I know some people in chat, I'm sorry if I missed this, by the way, because I've been on the whiteboard, say versus. Apparently my culinary thing is really throwing people for a loop here. Apples, cheeses, cookbooks. Derek has Derek worked on the line? Culinary school, maybe. No, I've never, I worked at a pizza place in my teens. I still make a pretty mean pizza pie. It was a mom and pop pizza shop, so it wasn't like a Domino's or Pizza Hut. It was a place where we actually had to make our dough, and we actually had to roll out the pizzas and, throw them up in the air and all that stuff. You didn't really have to throw up in the air because it was actually a waste of time, but in theory you could. But that's the only time I've ever worked, worked a fryer, worked an oven. But I did get really into baking, when I was, growing up. So yeah, anyways, there are game systems out here, as I was saying before, that actually do this, right? That certainly get to more of this concept. Okay. And these are some of the games that you always, hear me talking about on this channel. Games like Blades in the Dark. Okay. To a certain extent, Fabula Ultima does this. In a weird way, but it's not fully there. Legend of the Five Rings does this. Legend of the Five Rings is more of like a hybrid than the other two approaches. But of course, here's where the rub is. Okay. If this conversion can literally be anything, then it becomes very, very difficult for you to have any sort of control or any sort of common point to discuss things on. There's no way to compare things if you don't have a scale. This is why Blades in the Dark has that, in my opinion, really, really wonderful way of describing things, right? Which is position and effect. We all kind of know this, hopefully by now, right? And the baseline of position and effect is your position is controlled, risky, or desperate. And the effect can be limited, standard, or great. And essentially you end up with kind of a 9x9 grid where any action that a player wants to take in the game can be mapped to one of these 9 coordinates. So, and everybody understands. Now here's the thing. Desperate doesn't mean one exact thing. Now, it does have some mechanical components to it. But they're not set in stone, right? But what people can understand easily is that desperate is more intense, is more severe than risky. And risky is more intense or severe than controlled. In fact, controlled sounds like it's not that bad, right? And limited and standard and great, same thing. So if somebody says, I want to shove this folding boat up this dragon's butt and then unload it, I might say that sounds like that would be an amazing, and by the way, my goal is to kill or otherwise mess up this dragon. I might say, wow, you know what? That is actually a pretty cool idea. It's very great, right? Your effect is going to be significant. In D&D terms, you might say that's going to do a lot of damage. But I can also say that your position is desperate, right? Sneaking up to a dragon, getting that close to its rectum, right? This does not sound like a controlled situation or a risky situation. It sounds like it's a pretty desperate situation. And so what we end up in is this quadrant. Instead of an infinite possibility space, right? We've limited this down to just, this 3x3 grid. And while these effects and positions aren't, they're not carved in stone exactly what they mean, everybody at the table understands that there are certain things that these sort of relate to or connect to. But here's the most important part. The most important part is that your character, your PC, for example, can still have game mechanics that interact with this system. Okay. In Pathfinder 2nd Edition, we might say, I'm going to take a skill feat that affects climb. Right? That is me interacting with the rule set. Very reasonable. But we can all see and understand how that is kind of inherently, tied to having a rule set. So when you get rid of a rule set and you just have a set of principles and a set of conversions, you might say, but I lose that. Well, how can isn't my character going to be just a bunch of nothingness? There's a bunch of story time. Like, is there any way that my, PC can have some meat on its bones to interact with? And it says, well, of course you can. Because what you can say is maybe your character gets a bonus when they do something desperate, or maybe your character gets a bonus when they do something controlled, right? So in those situations, you're not really focusing on the specific action. You're sort of more focused on the outcome. You're more focused on the what is going on in this scenario, what kind of effect you're going to have. And I just find this kind of mechanic really, really interesting, intriguing, and great. But do I have a problem with it? Yeah. This is why I'm having this crisis of faith, because as much as I love all this, and by the way, Fortune Pumpkin's right, in Fabula Ultima, you can add your 2 attributes together. And in Legend of the Five Rings, you can choose your ring and your skill, as Sidon says. But okay, boom. Self-confessed cynic just hit on where my problem is. Again, why I love Blades in the Dark. It says you could also map the areas of the 9x9 to different DCs, right? Maybe you all were thinking that. He's absolutely right. But here is the problem with that. Self-confessed cynic. Believe it or not, my rants sometimes do actually have points. Do you remember at the beginning of this conversation where I said in Pathfinder 2, someone could say, oh, I let people go and I know you meant 3x3. Sorry. Yeah. People, I could let somebody do something that they don't have a feat for. I'll just make the effect less, or I will make it take more actions, or I'll make the DC higher. And as I said before, all I'm doing there is disincentivizing it, making it less likely that your character is going to succeed or do that, because the game rules and mechanics are punishing you. Something about Blades in the Dark, which a lot of people hate, probably Vin, is that if a situation is controlled, risky, or desperate, or the effect is limited, standard, or great, has no bearing on your percent chance of accomplishing the action. Right? In other words, I could totally say, yep, let's imagine, I don't know, Pathfinder 2 has such elevated, crazy numbers, but whatever. Let's imagine we're playing a standard D20 game and 5th edition or something, or lower level Pathfinder. And I say, yep, you could totally shove a folding boat up the dragon's butt and kill it instantaneously. But you're getting a lot of effect there. It's a lot of damage. So the DC is going to be 35. And yeah, you know what? That probably is accurate. You know what? Sneaking in and shoving a boat up a dragon's butt is probably very challenging and very difficult. And from a risk reward trade-off standpoint, you feel like, hey, you're getting an instant kill on this dragon using your folding boat. Sounds like it should be pretty high DC. I think we can all agree on that, right? Except, so then the party goes, okay, I guess we'll just go fight it with our swords and spells then, right? Because, yeah, why would we take this risk? Now, of course, a lot of people go, oh no, my players would do this, and they would do this, and they would do this. And what you're really saying is, to a certain extent, they just lower the DC to the point where it is no longer a high DC. So what you've really done is you've removed DC from the equation. But if you did it and you said, nope, you have to get a DC 30, you need to roll a 20, and the player goes in there and they roll anything other than a 20, and you go, oh, well, you fail, you don't even get close, the boat's not even halfway to his rectum when the dragon turns around, and I guess roll for initiative, but you're by yourself because you're trying to sneak in, and I guess you're dead. And that could be fine, I guess, for a certain type of game. But in my experience, a lot of players who like, oh, I love to play these, RPGs where you can really push your luck and gamble. I'm like, a lot of times when people give me these stories, all I hear in my voice is, man, your GM was fudging really, really, really badly. And so Vin says, you haven't removed the DC. You've made them work for the instant kill, which is in and of itself enjoyable. Okay. But I guess what I'm trying to say is by setting a DC, you are essentially saying, I am okay with this having one of two outcomes. You either die or you win instantly. Or you have to jump through a bunch of made up stuff that does not exist, has nothing to do with your character sheet, until I feel satisfied that I can lower the DC low enough to the point where you all will go and, actually make the check and more than likely succeed. Right? In fact, some GMs don't even tell the players the DC, so now they have no idea what's really even going on. Now, that's not to say anything wrong with DC per se. I'm just simply saying, in fact, actually, my point is this mechanic, which is what Blades in the Dark is that I think this is great. I love doing this. So then what is my problem? Right? The problem is when I play this game, suddenly, in a weird way, right? Anything is possible. And it becomes kind of like those old Mutants and Masterminds games where suddenly, what's going on, what's on, my character, what's on my sheet, like what's going on in the actual fiction starts to feel like it matters less. And it becomes more of a game of Mother May I, because I'm going to describe how my character is doing something until the GM says, oh, that'll have risky effect. Oh, now it'll have controlled effect. It'll have great effect. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing in of itself. I'm simply saying that it can, in my experience, playing PBTA games, okay? I've played them. I've played Root, and maybe, again, this could just be a failure of mine as a game master. But, when I've played Dungeon World, when I've played Blades in the Dark games, when I've played Root games, I always get to a point where I suddenly realize I am basically ignoring the rules and we're just kind of making things up and rolling dice. And at a certain, and I don't know how to express this to people that don't understand it, but the game matters to me. But I also feel like the structures, of the game, there's that line from the end of the third Batman movie, the third Christopher Nolan Batman movie, where the guy who's become, the guy who is Robin, right, goes, what you were saying about structures becoming shackles, right? And that's the same kind of idea here, is I think that in these instances, structures, the rule structures themselves can become shackles that can kind of lock us in. Hey, we just had a new adventurer. This is Larry Taylor. Hey, what's up, Larry? This is my good friend Larry Taylor, who hasn't played D&D with us in many years, but for the better part of 10 or 15 years, played D&D with us pretty much several times a week, and apparently wants me to come to the bar. But thank you for signing up, buddy. I assume you're downtown, Willoughby. Oh, it's Halloween. It's going to be crazy up there. What are you doing? Yes, Larry is a very, 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 very good friend. So actually, when this channel actually was just getting started, I was in a lot of trouble financially because my business was struggling, and Larry ended up moving in with me and basically paid my mortgage for the better part of a year, as sort of a pseudo rent, so that I could, try to salvage something. And so very, very, very good friend of mine. And it was all for the dog. All right. So, Larry, I'm probably not going to go to the bar tonight because it's Halloween, but maybe later this week. Yes, the whiteboard has indeed been broken out, Ayla. So back to what I was saying, Vin says, correct. If there's no real difficulty, anything is possible. It's Rainbow Fluffy Hour. What are we even doing here? Vin, you said it exactly correct. You said it exactly correct, because I live in a world as you, I know that that's the only world that you live in, but I used to live in a world. I grew up in a world, and I still kind of live in a world where, I want this concept of scaling difficulty. I want this concept of things to actually matter. But when things matter is when I find that players, don't get creative, and they become just, I'm going to use the mechanics of the game. Because if, players are one way or the other, most players are going to sort of play optimally, which is to say that if the game mechanics give them the best chance, and I said this once before on the Discord, I said, we were talking about people as combat as war. And I said, a lot of the people who say that they want combat as war over combat as sport, what they really mean is they only want combat as war when they're fighting monsters that are tougher than them. And if they try to use the game rules, would get their ass beat. They only want, so they want, when they're the favored party of combatants, then they want combat as sport. It's like, we should just play by the rules. We'll go in there and we'll use armor class and attack rolls. And because, we have the advantage. Oh, it's a really high level dragon. It's a really, difficult monster. If we try to beat that with our stats, we probably lose. Time to start bullshitting and coming up with ways so that we can ignore the rules so that we can still get what we want. As I said before, imagine if the players were just like, oh, you know what? We're going to take a quick break and we're just going to regather our things. And then suddenly out of nowhere, the goblins drop a bunch of barrels full of explosions into your camp. And I go, everybody's dead. We don't even need a dice roll because, they combat as war you really, really good. I don't think your players would like combat as war when it's the other way. Boothby says it right. They want combat as win. That is exactly right. So, yeah. I think that while I like Blaze in the Dark, I do feel that this creates, similar to my Mutants, which I like Mutants and Masterminds, but it creates a similar problem space where suddenly, in a weird way, any idea is a good idea. And suddenly, you can, in any situation you find yourself in, you can just kind of mumble a couple of things and make up something. And suddenly you're in a position where even if you have a desperate limited effect, right, which is like the worst you can get in this game, that's still a pretty reasonable chance of success. Right. And so, especially if you're rolling a bunch of dice. And so, yes, I understand that there are the options for no effect, and I understand that. But that's me just saying no, right? That's just the same way as me saying you basically can't do this, which again, I ideally don't want to do that. So self-confessed cynic is a very smart man. Says resource mechanics need to be used more often. To be honest, the alternative to difficulty is cost, which is what Fabula Ultima does, and other games could really play with more. And I couldn't agree more. Because as I've said before on this channel many times, one of my favorite role-playing game set of rules is Mouse Guard, but I really also just love Mouse Guard, sort of its philosophy. And I mean, of the people who played it before, I've said this before, but there's the statement, or the logo, the motto of the Mouse Guard is, it matters not what you fight, Okay. But what you fight for. Okay. And this is another way of sort of saying it's not about your chance of success. I'm more interested in what price are you willing to pay for what you want to accomplish. And because, the thing about a DC system is, right, we understand that, you could have a very low chance of success. But if the player goes ahead and quote unquote risks it, the only way that you can make that worth it is to make the outcome so successful, to make the penalty so bad that, probably they're going to kill the character, right? I'm going to shove the folding boat up the dragon's butt. Okay, well, you have a low chance of success, but in order to balance that out, if you fail, I guess you're dead. And that might be fine for certain games, but from my perspective, I'm just not really interested in doing that in these kind of games anymore. And so I've been forced to start looking for other ways to allow this to happen without it feeling like it's just a free lunch. Like it feels like we're playing, make it up, anything goes. What are we even doing here? So from the context I'm gathering, we were discussing how difficulty and game mechanics encourage or discourage creativity. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good way of saying it, but it's more like I'm just in general having an issue when I'm trying to figure out what is it that I want a role-playing game system to give me? What do I want it to do? Obviously, I know so many different role-playing game systems, but what is it about, what is it about the mechanics of the game that I am trying to get? What do I want this game system to do? Because it's really weird, because in some ways I want the game system to get the hell out of the way, right? I'm a capable GM. I play with adult players who aren't babies. And so we are capable of, interpreting situations and coming up with creative solutions and being able to sort of adapt and moderate on the fly. But I also don't want to do that and have it feel like I'm just literally making shit up, and that suddenly the players, whatever they say, doesn't really matter, because it's all just kind of like, I remember this old Looney Tunes cartoon where there's this guy showing it's supposed to be mocking. I think it's supposed to be mocking the mail service, but there's some cartoon who's back in those old cartoons where they would be like, here's an industrious lad busy sorting the mail. Oh, well, he's going to make sure that the mail gets to all the people it needs to get to. And it shows him just throwing all these letters into all these different boxes and he's sorting it. But on the other side, it's all just going into the same bucket, right? So it's all that work he's doing doesn't really matter. So that's kind of the problem, right? Where games like Blades in the Dark feel like they do not have as much or enough focus or enough resolution, might be what I would call it, right? When you think about resolution in terms of does your monitor have enough resolution to be able to distinguish between this thing and that thing, right? We just said Blades in the Dark kind of only has these 9 buckets, right? The resolution is everything gets grouped into this, or this, right? So you could think of it as having it's a very low resolution game. A game like Pathfinder 2 is a very high resolution game, right? There's a lot of little pixels, a lot of little, buckets. And so, everything ding, 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 gets, sorted out into all of these different little buckets. But the problem there is you lose flexibility, right? You lose the ability to sort of, feel empowered to be creative. And I think that is also, very, very problematic as well. Larry says, wait, our friends are adults? Some of them, I hope. Hey, we're getting together this weekend to play board games. I hope. Exactly, Isaiah. I don't want the game to be complete hand wavium. We did a 6 or 7 episode actual play of Root, and it's a lot of fun. But, if you watch that game system, if you watch those stories, if you watch those game sessions, you could see that it's, basically at any point in time, a character can kind of do anything they want, and the game rules will sort of allow them to do it. And they can kind of just make anything up, and I can kind of just make anything up. So there's a feeling there of ephemerality, if that's even a word, right? Ephemeralness, that like nothing's real. There's no tooth to it, right? This is the problem when you get too high into gamist and narrativist without the simulationism. The problem is I hate simulationism. So what the hell am I supposed to do? Right? Because whenever the game gets more simulationist, I just get frustrated with it. And I start, I get mad at the game mechanics. I go, this is stupid. This is restrictive. This is dumb. I can't believe that they have a rule for this and that the rule for this is this bad, or is this stupid, or is this uninspired, or is this lame? It frustrates me. And of course, this is where everybody goes, well, Derek, that's why you got to create Night Finder. And to be honest with you, the idea of I want to play a game, let me just completely rebuild another game from scratch just seems completely absurd to me. So that isn't really a viable option, Ayla, Derek, it sounds like there are two wolves inside of you. One wants rulings over rules, and the other wants rules over rulings. Yes, thank you for being very discreet with that. That is correct. And they're having a tug of war over what makes for a more compelling game experience. And you're absolutely right. That is exactly right. Because there are times when playing within the limitations of what the game allows you to do is the fun part. When I play Magic the Gathering and I need to kill my opponent's creature, I can't just make something up. I can't be like, my planeswalker casts fire, which kills your thing. It's like, no, you have the spells in your hand, and that's all you can do. But when I'm playing, and that's great for Magic the Gathering, but when I'm playing a role-playing game, right? I'm like, come on, it's a role-playing game, right? Like, we should be coming up with the cool things, and we should be able to be creative, and we shouldn't just be bound into these game rules. And your character should totally be able to just be like, I summon forth fire to consume my foes. And then it's like, okay, then because this combat's still taking an hour because we have all these cards and we have all these feats and we have all these hit points. Like, which is it? And it's like this sort of casual way that some people flow between the two of them. I would just find that to be, it might work for you and your group, but I find it to be wholly unsatisfying. Let's see here. Thanks, Josh. We were kind of just all over the place and kind of me just ranting into the void. Jackal says 13th Age. Now, we played 13th Age. That was pretty fun. 13th Age is admittedly probably a pretty good game for what I'm talking about. It's got enough tooth. It's got a lot of freedom, but I'm trying to think what 13th Age lacks. I'm not sure. There's something. I'm not sure what it is. Unfortunate Pumpkin says, I 1000% agree, Derek. High simulationist games frustrate me, but too high of narrativist and gamist games can really lead to bringing yourself away from the world of the game. Night Finder by necessity would be able to do enough. You're talking about a blend of 4E, FU, and Blades in the Dark. Ooh, right. Which in theory, right, someone might say, isn't that Lancer? Right? Or isn't that Icon? Icon's 4E plus Blades in the Dark. But the thing is all they did is, like I said, is they put two different games inside one game. And that to me is just not as compelling. Now, Fabula Ultima does have sort of mechanics that bridge those gaps. So maybe you're right. It is maybe a blend of those games. And we haven't even talked about the genre problem. Okay. You want to talk about the genre problem? So that's a whole other issue. Okay. Mr. Taylor says, this is basically the conversation we were having at dinner the other night. You need rules to ensure consistent behavior. and avoid constant questions and debates. But abstractions of rules are really hard to not make arbitrary and unsatisfying while also being expansive. 100 problem. All right. So the other problem is the genre problem, which is this. I love, dungeons. Okay. I love going and, killing monsters and taking their stuff. And I love the classic dungeons of Dungeons and Dragons. And I love that concept of a game. But a lot of these games that I'm talking about just completely don't work in a dungeon environment. Blades in the Dark does not work in the dungeon, right? A dungeon is inherently a sort of a challenge space. So genre is what kind of game I want to play is a huge deal, right? And there are times when I want to tell these expansive epic stories, and I don't want to tell it in the sense that I want to write it. I want to participate with my friends. In fact, in full transparency, in full honesty to this entire group of however many people here showed up tonight, 55 viewers, is, the number of games that I've had in my life that have really had a really compelling story, one that you would want to write down and tell to somebody else, has been fairly limited, right? A lot of times, our games are fun and they're great and I enjoy them to the hell and back. But a lot of times it's us kind of, I'm not saying it's beer and pretzel, but there's a degree of us getting around and having fun and going into a dungeon, going into, an adventure, going into a module, killing stuff, getting treasure, leveling up, right? And that's fine. And I love that genre. But I also find that genre very, very unsatisfying. And I want there to be, a bigger, more epic, more compelling story with politics and intrigue. And we see these in some of, my other game systems that I play, Blades in the Dark and Root. But whenever I try to do that in like a D&D or a Pathfinder, inevitably I find myself missing just, going into a dungeon and killing stuff and taking treasure. The fact of the matter is, though, going into a dungeon, killing stuff and taking its treasure doesn't really lend itself well to these sort of epic scoped stories, right? Mines of Moria is really a great example. Lord of the Rings, Mines of Moria was an obstacle, right? To be crossed quickly so that they can, destroy the ring and get to Mordor. They weren't like, all right, Fellowship, let's make camp. All right, we're going to go explore. We're going to go loot this level. Then we're going to return. Maybe we'll go back to Rivendell, sell some loot, get some better magical items. Then we'll head back to Moria. I heard there's a Balrog in this bitch. Like, let's level up. I want to go get a demon slaying sword from the elves. We'll all get total fire resist. We'll go back down there. Durin's Bane. He's our bitch. Then we'll turn this whole thing into a dwarven stronghold. It'll be so sick, right? Some of you are probably nodding your heads like, oh, dude, that sounds sweet. That's how I'd want to play Lord of the Rings. And yeah, kind of me too. I like that. I like the idea of Dungeons and Dragons. Like, I'm talking about like the way Dungeons and Dragons is written in the books. But whenever I find myself in a dungeon game, I just go, oh God, another dungeon, another combat. After a couple of sessions, I'm just like, yep, here's another 10-foot hallway. Here's another, it gets boring. I can't say that, my talk of fire resist gear just took me back to Nagy, little EverQuest thing. Oh yeah, fire resist gear is sweet. Vin says that does sound sweet. Ayla says, this sounds like my 3.5 games. And to be fair, this sounds like my 3.5 games as well. Larry says, I like the creative problem solving within the rules of the shape stone, for example, or stone shape spell, but having to had anticipated you need that spell is the rules arbitrariness thing that I hate. Yeah. So yeah, I don't have to single out his comments. You're a member, Larry. Larry, members get special attention. yes, more variety, and you're correct, quite correct. Dungeons, and I love dungeons. I've done whole things on dungeons, and I love. And by the way, a lot of the mechanics, especially in these D20 based games like Pathfinder and D&D, work particularly well in a dungeon environment. That being said, you're quite right. They do not offer a lot of variety of gameplay. They can get very samey, and that can be very boring. I think the other part of the problem is like, I don't know, maybe this is just me. You all can tell me. Like, the mechanics of the games now are so combat focused that doing anything out of combat either feels like it's just like a hand wave or just like a simple, like, yeah, you can do that. Or it's some horrible mechanic that feels completely unsatisfying. We were playing Abomination Vaults this past Friday, and sure enough, once again, it came up, open lock. Now, obviously, it feels wrong to just say, you pick the lock, right? You pick the lock, right? Just hand wave it. Yeah, you've got lock picks. You pick the lock, right? That doesn't feel satisfying. I don't think, not really. But also, watching somebody sit there and roll dice as the thief or whoever, the rogue, tries to sit there and get 3 open lock successes is just such an unsatisfying mechanic. I just don't understand how we can have such robust and cool, things for combat, and then out of combat is just so shitty, I agree. It isn't satisfying, but at least it's more satisfying than spamming dice. I mean, I agree. In fact, I think this is the reason why I go so off, why I like Powered by the Apocalypse and I like Blades in the Dark so much, is because when somebody goes to, pick a lock, I could say, make a roll. And regardless of what happens with that dice roll, for starters, the mechanics of the game are set up to encourage them to succeed, right? I want, be a fan of your players. I want the players to succeed, right? And I'm not saying I want it to be a free giveaway, but when I put a cool room, in my dungeon, if I put a secret chamber, okay, like I'll give you an example. And again, you got to put on your Pathfinder 1 3E caps, okay? On level 1 of the dungeon, okay, I put a treasure vault, okay, that was tied to this wizard who had come to the dungeon a couple years earlier. And in this treasure vault, level 1 was a +2 strength item, +2 dex item, +2 int item, con item, wizard item, charisma item, right? 6 +2 stat items. This is on level 1 of the dungeon, which means that your character, your party, could at level 1 or 2, or so, get these items, which is really, really powerful for characters of that level. And then to guard it, I had this room, which had a permanent darkness spell. It had blizzard cold room, or had blizzard effects, wind blowing through it, and there were pits scattered throughout the room. Okay? Figuring this should keep people away for at least a couple levels. But if not, maybe they get killed. Well, long story short, the players had some fun, clever solutions. We made some dice rolls. They got lucky. I put that room there. I wanted them to find it. I wanted them to find the cool treasure. I didn't want to put it there and then make it impossible for them to get to. Of course I want them to find it. I just don't want it to just be like, all right, I don't know. Everybody make a con check to see if you can get through the cold. And then, I don't know, make an acrobatics check to see if you can avoid the pits. It's like, that doesn't feel satisfying. That doesn't feel like you earned it. But at the same time, if the players went, all right, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to town and we're going to get custom ice gear made for us. And then we're going to, we're going to put in this, then we're going to create a pulley system of this. And then we're going to create, and then suddenly they've just taken care of everything. And you just go, okay, yeah, you're in, you get in. There's no problem. You're in the vault. No roll. You guys just solved every issue. and there's no refund. That also doesn't feel satisfying, right? So it's like, for me, it's like the out of combat stuff is the stuff that really, really gets boring. I mean, and then so as a player, it's like combat becomes repetitive, and then outside of combat, it becomes kind of boring, All right, I missed a bunch of stuff here. We had a tip from Shy Knight. Thanks, Shy Knight. Said, we sit down often and play lots of board games with various mechanics and various rules. Why are we concerned about playing a hybrid system of PF2 rules during combat and Forge of the Dark or PBTA out of combat? Can't these systems be harmonized? Shy Knight, maybe they can. And again, there are game systems that try to do that, with limited success. It's just a question of there are games like Lancer that it doesn't really merge them. It just has 4E combat over here, Pathfinder 2, super crunchy combat over here, and then it has this super narrative mechanics over here. Like the idea that we're in combat now, so now we have to play by the rules is not something I ever agree with. And I know there's a lot of people here who will basically say, I love freewheeling and I love just coming up with cool ideas with the players, and we'll just make up a DC and we'll just come up with cool, crazy rules. It's like, in combat, and they go, no, in combat, it's raw. In combat, creativity dies once you start into combat. Then it's just rules. I don't like that, that tonal shift when that stuff happens. All right. Oh, let's see. Have I played Wicked Ones? I have not played Wicked. I understand the concept of Wicked Ones, right? You're the bad guys in the dungeon, but I have not played it. I know some people have played it. I think Darth Gorlock was running it on the server, but I have not played it. Out of combat is just fluffy bullshit time 90% of the time in most modern games. And again, well said. That's another thing that I find unsatisfying. I like exploration phase, and I mean that in the legitimate sense, right? I like exploring. I like the actual act of exploring, and learning about the location and the dungeon and trying to figure things out and figure out where stuff is and where's the treasure at and what are the guardians and is this a dangerous trap and is there another way around and I wonder what this key goes to and is there a secret door here? I mean, I actually enjoy that exploration point a lot. I mean, it's weird to say this, but when I used to play World of Warcraft, everybody grind the quests or just go straight into dungeons and do the dungeon raids. I used to just, walk around the zone, to actually just find stuff and look at stuff and, just kind of be cool. This is really neat to me. And a lot of you probably didn't play EverQuest, but in World of Warcraft, we're used to these instanced dungeons, right? Where you and your party go in and it's a dungeon and it's basically just a, hallway full of monsters leading to a boss. But in EverQuest, dungeons were open world. And so the dungeons were more like old school D&D dungeons, right? Labyrinthine passageways, confusing stairways, different levels, deadly monsters, sometimes, around a corner, pit traps that could take you down. It was like a real dungeon, except it had a bunch of other players in it at the same time sometimes. And I just remember, as being a young, was just exploring these dangerous places and having that be insanely satisfying. I wasn't gaining experience. I wasn't gaining treasure. I just thought that being there and being in that dangerous place and learning about it was a very satisfying experience for me. Nober says Kingdom Rules in Kingmaker has to be the most unsatisfying mechanic in all of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And that's kind of what I'm talking about, Nober. I mean, open lock for me has to come first. But having the mechanic there, just to have a mechanic and then it's boring and then it's horrible and it's unapparent, that is not what I want, right? Out of my game. I want something more compelling than that. Skill checks for me in Pathfinder and D&D games are so boring. And you know what, Bernardo? They're boring for me as well. There is never a point where I like a skill check in a Pathfinder or a D&D game. KC. I saw somebody about us earlier said, am I going to kickstart MCDM's game? Yes, because I joined his Patreon a couple of months back, like the beginning of the year, just so I could get the updates on his design thing. I feel like there's a lot that he's doing that I'll probably like. I do not think this is going to be like the game, for me personally, but I do think that he is stealing, whatever you want to call it, from a bunch of games that most people have never heard of, and games that our people here might know about. But obviously, Matt Colville is, inspired by 4th edition. But what people aren't seeing is that he is also inspired by Iron Heroes system and the Strike system, both of which he is using in his game system. And most people probably are not aware of those game systems. And so they're kind of like, oh, he's coming up with all this stuff. I'm not trying to say that, look, right? Chefs use the same ingredients that everybody else has been using for 1,000 years. They're not trying to, you don't make up new ingredients. You just put them together in different ways. That's totally fine. I'm not knocking him for that. All I'm saying is the ideas that he is putting together are ideas that I've had and wanted to do for a very long time. I don't want to get into like the concept of it, but basically Iron Heroes uses resource systems that you accumulate by sort of doing the thing that your character is supposed to do. And that awards you with these points that build up in a resource pool. And then you can trade those points in to do a cool effect, right? So if you want to do a really, really big, powerful attack, it might cost 8 points. Then you either need to wait several rounds of combat or you need to do some stuff that's going to accumulate points for you. I always felt like that was a really cool idea, but the implementation of it in Iron Heroes was a little lackluster. The point gathering was cool, but what you could do with the points never really felt great. Enter 4E's combat system, where you have these really cool, amazing, awesome, fun, kind of over-the-top, dare I say, anime-esque powers, but it feels kind of strange that, like, there's no, I just can use them. So the idea here is that I have a cool power that I can use, but I have to like build up to it by doing the thing in combat to like accumulate enough points to spend it. And then I get the cool power. And then that to me, I think could be a very satisfying game loop within a combat. And it also solves some of my issues with 4E, which is like round 1 Nova-ing, right? You can't really Nova if you have to build up power points or build up points first before you can use them. So you can't use your most powerful attack or daily or power or spell in round 1 of the combat because it won't be available to you. You won't have enough points in the pool. All right, but KC says, sounds like MCDM tried to fix that misalignment with a negotiation system and people have hated it. So I'm not sure what you can do to balance it out well in Fantasy 20. Interesting, KC. Maybe you could provide some more context to that because I'd be curious to know what you mean about why they hated it. Like what, again, I signed up for his Patreon, but I'll be the first to admit I have not really kept up with everything. So I'm not really sure what negotiation system you're talking about. Unfortunate Pumpkin is saying every roll should matter. That's like one of the unofficial mottos of Pathfinder 2. It's not a good one. Gotcha. Okay. So like social combat, KC. I'm not sure a lot of people actually want a crunchy set of rules for out of combat stuff. And you know what? You're probably right, Ayla. You're probably right. I'm in 100% agreement, but I've never played Legend of the Five Rings. And again, I don't want rules for out of combat stuff because I just said rules are bad. What I want are principles. I want guidelines. Right? I can tell you that making skill checks outside of combat, because it doesn't exist, in Blades in the Dark is really fun. It's very interesting. It's very engaging. The position effect, negotiation, using a devil's bargain, using some of your gear, using certain abilities on your character sheet or your playbook to modify the effects. That is all a very satisfying, gamey experience that is still both descriptive and prescriptive. In other words, it is describing what you're doing, but it is also setting out the rules for what is going to happen when you do the thing. And since there is no combat in Blades in the Dark, I find that to be a very satisfying element. But I guess a lot of people don't. I don't know. Let's see. Let's Let's see. All the best combat is war moments I've experienced if it happened ironically out of combat. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, 100%. EverQuest exploration was half the fun. Oh yeah, for big time. Oh yeah, you know what? Jackal, I was literally thinking Lower Gook. When I was describing the complex, things. I was literally thinking Lower Gook. It's exactly the zone I was thinking of. Yeah, and I get it. You know what Pumpkin was saying, like we want every roll to matter, so we feel like, well, look, like if I put a lock here, I want my rogue to be able to pick it, but I also don't want to just say you can pick it, hand wave it, no rules, just roll it. But then you're like, okay, well, you got to put a rule in there. What are you going to put in there? I don't know. Make a lock picking check, make a thievery check, make a couple of them. And you're like, okay, yeah, this doesn't interesting, right? It's not. And some people say, oh, well, that's why you got to put a timer in. And it's like, okay, but does that really make it more interesting? I don't think it does. I still don't think it delivers. I mean, to be fair, I've gone on record of saying this. While I think 4th edition actually tried to do more than any other system ever did, I think skill challenges are fundamentally really boring. The way that they're presented. The victory point systems from Pathfinder 2, I think, are very boring. I mean, you could argue whether you like them or not. They might be effective. I'm not saying that is the case. I'm just saying I don't think they're fun to engage with. I think they're boring. Wojo. Well, if you catch up to this point, Wojo, welcome. Hello. Bernardo says Iron Heroes was amazing. So sad it never got the fame it deserved. And Bernardo, do you know who the lead designer on Iron Heroes was? Mike Merles. That's right. The self-same 5e Mike Merles. But yeah, it was really, really awesome. So it was the precursor to that was actually called Book of Iron Might, which was released as like a 3e supplement. And then they released Iron Heroes as sort of like an entire variant player's handbook built around the Book of Iron Might. There's a blast from the past on that. I wonder if you can go find that one on Drive-Thru RPG. Yes? No. Yes, you can. $7 PDF. Book of Iron Might by Mike Merles. All right. Shadowrun 6th edition has a similar momentum building system, but people hate it. Yeah, I've just found those systems to be very boring. Corel, have you looked at D20's alpha yet? Or DC20's alpha yet? DC20. Corel, I don't even know what that is. DC20. What is this? It's an RPG. Oh, Dungeon Coach. No, I have not. Corel, are you a Dungeon Coach fan? I'm just curious if have you looked at it? I always have this idea of using PF2E rules for combat and somehow translate the skills to a Fate-like system for out-of-combat situations. I guess the question is, why do people want, one but not the other? Why is the idea that when we get into combat, we suddenly want to stop being creative and we want to start playing it like a board game? Isn't part of the problem like that, like these combats end up feeling too much like a board game anyways? I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, it's just a checkbox activity. Exactly, Boothby. Larry says he accidentally threw the Book of Iron Might across the room the other day. How do you still own that book? That's absurd that you even own that book. It's rough. Talking about the DC20, but has a lot of interesting ideas. Feels like a smoothed down PF2. Well, again, I don't know the Dungeon Coach that well. I haven't had a chance to meet him, but from his streams, that my sense is that he came to 5e like that. I think that was his first major RPG. And I think he, mostly played video games before that. So it's, one of those situations where sometimes maybe not having the same background as everybody else is actually kind of maybe a benefit. I don't know. 13th age. Don't you also have all your 3 ebooks? I do. They're mostly behind me. The problem is, number one, I haven't moved across the country several times. And number two, I've still actively been playing role-playing games for the last decade or 2 decades than you did. So yeah, again, there is no answer to this because again, this is just sort of where I'm grappling with. Bob picked up Forbidden Lands the other day because we were talking about it up at the studio, and I was describing how we were actually up there talking about some secret Knights of Last Call projects. And I was saying about how this is a game system that I thought was really, really, really interesting. I know it has some problems with the some of the dice pool mechanics are a little bit problematic, but I was like, but I haven't gotten to the table. I don't want to say it doesn't work, the Year Zero engine. And so for some odd reason, Bob just thought the books were so gorgeous. He went and bought it. So I don't know if we're going to get a chance to play this. We really want to beat Abomination Vaults. The group just killed Jafaki on level 6. And so now they have to go down to level 7 to the Devils. But they're level 9 now because there's only 3 of the PCs. So they're actually a little higher level. So hopefully that means that they can just kind of kick ass and take names. The Bob's Barbarian died. He's a kineticist now. The Rogue died and he's a fighter now. So, the party is a sorcerer, a sorcerer, a fighter, and a kineticist. Okay. An arcane sorcerer, who has crossblood evolution heal, a fighter, and a kineticist. So needless to say, for a 3-man party, they are about as, as strong as you can get. So in theory, we should try to get through it. But it's like, I know I tell myself not to try to do this, but it's like, do not, just be like, we got to finish, we got to grind this till we finish it. But yeah, I do want to finish it. So, let's see here. Larry says if he ever played again, he'd play 3E. Hector says, have I ever, hey, did you ever use infiltration or influence subsystem for PF2E and yeah, if yes, what is your opinion on it? I mean, I've used similar sub concepts and subsystems. Like I really tried to want to use it, Hector, in my Quest for the Frozen Flames game, but I just felt like it didn't have enough play to it. And so I'm not a huge fan of it. I think it's a good system for abstractly tracking these things, but the way that it's so rote with interacting with it, if you're just sitting there rolling checks to get, more victory points, I'm not a big fan of that. Let's see. Ayla says, I rather enjoy the crunchy combat. I'm the type of person that would enjoy Lancer and wouldn't mind the tonal shift between combat and out of combat. I think it vibes with how a lot of folks play anyways. And Vin says, I should read Lancer. Yeah, I think that's just a personal opinion difference, it's just something that I to be fair, like I have this problem with with Torchbearer or Mouse Guard. You're playing this game, it has this really awesome skill system, and then you get into a conflict, not a combat, but a conflict. And conflict in Torchbearer could be anything. It could be a fight, it could be running away, a chase scene, it could be fleeing from the demon, right? Conflict uses this entirely different system with cards, and it's kind of like a paper, rock, scissors, lizard, Spock card system, and you have to like slot 3 cards in, and then you suddenly have this imaginary hit point total called disposition, and it becomes this entirely separate thing. And I'm not a big fan of it. and that's actually what really keeps me from really enjoying Torchbearer and Mouse Guard is the conflict system. And even Legend of the Five Rings, which I really, really, really like. The conflict system is super crunchy, and it feels just very different from the way that the game was working before. Suddenly it feels so constrained and locked in. And it's interesting how even Aaron says the tonal shift is very different. Apparently we can sign up for Daggerheart public playtest. Interesting. Daggerheart public playtest. Let's see what we got here. It's a survey looking for playtests. So interesting. There we go. Have you read A Manifesto in Defense of Simulationism? Maybe. Who wrote it? Let me see here. No, I don't think I have read this. All right. I pulled it up while you read. I'll read it later. I'm not going to read it right now, but let's see. Thank you, Derek, for eloquently putting into words what I couldn't tonight. I've been going through something similar to you. Yeah, it's just kind of tough, you know. I mean, part of the problem is I've read it. I've been exposed to a lot of different games, and I think they all interest me in different ways, and I feel myself just being pulled in too many different directions, you know. But there's definitely something there that I think really stands out to me, for sure. Oh, that reminds me of something else that I've really been focused on lately, which is this idea of input of randomness. And something that I realized is, right, so there's kind of two ways of thinking about randomness, right? So you could have a decision, right? And then randomness, and then outcome, right? So this is output randomness, right? You make a decision, and you might be taking into account a lot of different factors. Usually you're taking into account odds. You're trying to take into account, like, what's my percent chance of success? And some people really enjoy doing things that, you know, manipulate those odds in your favor to the highest degree to give you the best chance of a random output that is good. This is obviously this is D&D, right? The other way of thinking about randomness is input randomness. Okay. So you have some sort of random process that limits what you're able to do. Then you make a decision that leads to an output, right? So obviously both of these have value. Different games use them. Obviously most D&D games use this here. But lately I've really been thinking more and more about this. And especially in the context of role-playing games. And for those of you who, I don't know if I have it. Oh, hold on a second, it's right here. Let me pull it up here real quick. All right, so this is a game that we played in the late 90s before 3rd edition came out. But 2nd edition, D&D was out, and this game came out. This is Dragonlance 5th Age for the Saga rules system, all right? And I don't think I have the cards in here. But in this game, you didn't roll D20. You were dealt a hand of cards. Okay. And basically the higher level you were, the more cards that were in your hand. And as you took damage, you would have to play, like if I took 10 points of damage, I would have to discard 10 or more value worth of cards. So I could discard a 7 and a 3, or I could discard a 5 and a 5, right? I have to add up to 10 points of damage. And then those cards don't get replaced in my hand until I'm healed. Normally though, you play a card from your hand, and then you draw a new card. The card that you play right, is essentially what your D20 roll is. Except it was like the numbers only went 1 to 10. But, imagine they could easily go to 1 to 20, or imagine D20 shrunk down to a D10. So you had your stat, your strength, your intellect, your dexterity. And so if I said make a dexterity check, you would choose a card from your hand to play. Now, you might play, if you have a high card, that might change the way that you think about the game. But then you're thinking, but once I play that card, I'm going to draw a new one to replace it randomly off the top of the deck. Might be, statistically, it'll probably be worse. So I'm sort of giving up future potential. But what's interesting is Saga did a really interesting job of actually introducing a sort of a hybrid approach, which actually kind of kept kind of interesting, which is you had, so, obviously you get this, it's kind of like this, right? You have this random hand of cards that you've been given. And then you say, I'm going to make a decision, right? I'm going to play my 7. Okay. And I have, let's say my dexterity is 5. So now my total is 12. And if the DC is 12, then I succeed. Right. And typically you knew what the DC was. So it might seem like this is completely, fixed once you had it. But one of the cool things that they added to the game is that every card had a suit, like clubs or spades, except in this game, they were suits like swords and arrows and moons and crowns and shields and helms. And each suit, right, corresponded to a different stat. So like the suit of swords correspond to strength. The suit of arrows was for dex, right? The suit of moons was for intellect. What's interesting is if I asked you to make a strength check or a dex check, and you played a card that had that suit matched, what you got to do is you got to go to the deck of cards and randomly pull a card off the top and add whatever value was in that top left corner. Okay. So if you flip this over and you got a 4, you would have gotten a 5 plus your 7 plus the random 4, and you would have actually ended up with a 16. So there was kind of like a cool random gambling aspect to it that I thought was really cool. Anyways, this was a game system I played when I was, probably like, 16, 17 years old. So pretty young in my journey. I'd probably only been playing D&D for, 5 or 6 years. And I remember this game being like so cool to me. And then, we went, 3rd edition came out and we never played it again. But it really reminded me of like Legend of the Five Rings, where you assemble this dice pool of dice, right? And then you roll them, and then you pick which ones that you're going to actually use. So you might roll 7 dice, but you're only going to keep 3 of them or 4 of them. And some of the dice have good symbols. Some of the dice have bad symbols. Some of the dice have a mixture of good and bad symbols. And so you're making this interesting choice about what you want. And I think that that's a really compelling gameplay pattern to me because, when the check itself has the risk built into it and there's this idea of like player control, that to me feels very empowering as a player. I guess, I mean, rightfully so, right? This second pattern here of randomness, then a decision, then an output, to me feels much, much, much better. This is just to me personally, than making a decision and then getting a random output. This to me feels like gambling, right? This to me feels like strategy. And while I do think that there's a time and a place for gambling, I think by and large, I think I prefer strategy to gambling. And I think a lot of times when people get frustrated, like me, when I play like certain strategic games that actually have a high degree of luck, I feel like, what are we even doing here? wait, I thought this was supposed to be a strategy game, but it has such a high luck factor. It doesn't really feel like a strategy game anymore. It feels like it's a luck-based game. It feels like I'm gambling. And it kind of feels like the better player isn't necessarily the one that's going to win. And then, I mean, obviously there's a spectrum there, because maybe a good decision gives you a slightly better odds of winning, but unless it's very significant, it can feel like it's very frustrating. And like, again, strategy games with a high degree of luck can be very, very, very frustrating. King Fate, all remastered spell names ranked when? I don't know, King Fate. It depends, King Fate. Does Nice Last Call channel need to, get money, get subs, and get people to sign up for our Patreon? Then we'll probably do it, because those 87 hours of spell ranking videos did very well for us. Gosh. Jojo, the J-Man says, if I get into combat and the wizard just sleeps all the guys, I want to end it all. And if we're just standing in a circle beating up a meat bag, I feel the same way. And Jojo, I agree with you. Both of those aren't necessarily very compelling outcomes to combat. Let's see. Do I have the Marvel Saga? I don't know, Hardrick. I don't think I do. But I don't think I do. I'm certainly aware of it. I know what the box looks like. I used to see it, but I never did. I don't think I ever picked it up. Let's see. Look, just catching up here. Sounds like I am looking for Cortex Prime. I don't know if you're talking to me, but I don't think so. I read Cortex Prime, and as much as I don't want oh God, why can't I think of his name? Cam Banks. Cam Banks apparently has gotten a lot of shit for people who say that Cortex Prime was terrible. I did not like Cortex Prime. But yeah. Yeah. So anyways, I've just become really interested in this idea of input randomness rather than output randomness, that the randomness is more of like, hey, this turn you have these couple of options to choose from. You can pick whichever one you want, and the effect is not in question. Or another way to think of it might be like, imagine if a attack in a role-playing game had two components, say damage and an effect. Or maybe it had damage and damage. Or maybe it had an effect and an effect. And when you're rolling for is, do you get one or both? Right? And so you say, I'm going to use this healing strike power, okay? Because I want to attack and I want to do damage, but I also want to heal my ally. Like the worst thing in the world. I used to see this all the time in 4th edition. Like someone would use that power. That's actually a power from 4th edition. I think it's a cleric power, but they would miss. And not only did they do nothing, not only did they not attack the opponent, but like the whole plan that everybody was working on just went up in smoke because, they rolled a 7 or a 6 on the D20. It's not like some absurdly low chance. It's like, no, it's like you're going to miss, 33 to 50% of the time. And it just felt so like, oh, and it's not like these combats are 100 rounds long where, okay, you missed, but on the, you're going to have so many rounds of combat. Who's even going to be able to tell? It's like, no, it's like these combats are going to be, 4 to 5 rounds. So it's like, if you miss, that's like 20% of the entire combat is gone. But imagine if when you miss, it's like, okay, you can still heal your ally, but then you're not going to do any damage to the monster. Or you could do the damage to the monster and not heal your ally. You get to pick. And it's like, oh, well, you know what? Really, it's more important that at this point that I heal my ally. So I'm going to heal them and I won't do any damage. So you're still getting it's kind of like me trying to get to that like saga thing where you make a decision, but there's still that sort of little bit of gamble right at the end, to sort of make it a little bit. So it's not just completely procedural. So it's not just a completely deterministic outcome, right? So there's some variation to it. I don't know, just something in that space. Right. But yeah, that's been something that's been on my mind. Derek, how did Saga combat work? Was there a fixed DC or was it a contest? No, the GM did not play cards. The GM monsters would attack the player, and the player would have to play a card to defend. I think they had to play agility to defend. I think so. Oh, for the monster's armor class. I don't know. The base DC was definitely 8. I don't know if that was modified by the monster stat or not, but I think it might have been modified by the monster stat. I'm not sure. Anyways, you can go look. I mean, I have the book right here. Here we go. Let's see here. This book's very old. Here we go. Resist personal or melee attack. It says it uses strength and it's opposed by endurance. So, not quite sure what that means as we look up this really old game. Here we go. I don't know. All right. Don't know. It just goes back to what I was saying all along. We should just use MTG as a resolution mechanic. Yeah, it's a little bit more nuanced than that, Pumpkin. I don't think we can necessarily just go and use MTG as a resolution mechanic. But I do think that there's some value in, I think, giving players that kind of ability and control. I don't know. I'm looking for something, folks. So what's on the docket? I'm going to wrap up. We're playing Abomination Vaults. We got Remaster. I'm going to be on Roll for Combat tomorrow, by the way, talking about the Cleric. There's some cool choices there in the Cleric. They got some cool new feats. I like what they did for the most part. Pathfinder 2. We've got the super party now for our Friday game. Fighter, Sorcerer, Kineticist. Kineticist is dumb. It's dumb. It's so dumb. That class is, and I know Bob's not cheating because, in fact, Bob, if anything, is playing his Kineticist very badly. Like, he still doesn't understand that, like, vitality damage isn't like spirit damage, right? That it only works against undead. So he's tried to use it like twice now against like living creatures. Anyways, what a powerful class. So we have that. We might do Fabula Ultima. I don't know if that's going to be for the channel. If we do it going to be for the channel. And if we go and do but I also want to get this Forbidden Lands game going. And maybe a 4E game going. So, there's this is a great 20 to 30 minute stream. That is accurate. You know me. So yeah. Oh, it's definitely strong. It's definitely power creep. I mean, like, the fact is like, okay, they were level 7 characters, because, it's just like his Earth character or whatever, his Earth Wood Kineticist already had armor specialization. So he's taking 3 or 4 points, 3 points off, 2 points off, something like that from 3 + 1, maybe. I don't know. Maybe it is 4 points. I don't know. He's taking like 4 points of slashing damage off of like every attack. But then he also gets back 7 or 8 temporary hit points basically every round because of his wood strike or wood impulse. So you're looking at like, oh, hey, Bob, you take 18 damage. It's like, okay, well, that gets reduced to 15. And then it's like, okay, take off 7 or 8. It's like, okay, take 6. It's really, and then he has unlimited healing from his fruit. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Thank you, Vin, for your coming to America and for that generous donation. Oh, well. All right. Now, to be fair, it says consider an ASR remaster, but, I did put that up as a joke, and, sounds like it might be time to go to the bar. Maybe. Oh boy, it's not what I needed. It's not what I needed today. Boothby. Oh, I thought you were saying. I was saying sorry. I thought this was Boothby's comment, and I was like, like from the same Boothby, the one who paid an absurd amount of money to make sure that we would have to do a fucking Christmas holiday Poppet adventure. Yeah, that same. I was like, oh, never mind. It was London. Yeah, read the read the chat properly. I did. I severely undervalued hundreds of hours of pain. Well, Larry, there's not too many right now. Although there was one a couple weeks ago where for $10,000 we would delete the channel. So there was that one. But that goal has lapsed. Anyways, thank you. Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter actually is we've been so busy lately because I had last Thursday I had Steven on. Last Thursday I had Mark on. The Thursday before that we had Vin on, right? And then the last couple of Tuesdays we've been up at the studio. It's been more of a group channel. We haven't had this opportunity to really sit down and sort of dig dive, like do the first looks, do the stuff. It's like I wish I could stream like more than 2 or 3 times a week. It's tough. But even doing the Sunday stream on top of the Tuesday stream, on top of the Thursday stream, and sometimes I do a RFC stream, it's like, man, it takes up a lot of time. And of course, all of I spend a lot of time with you all on the Discord and trying to answer questions, play along with everybody, and and I'm setting up games to play with patrons. So again, it's going to be pretty insane. Good stuff. We do need to do a FU. What would the FU high fantasy stream even be? I mean, I would just be like, yeah, it's a cool book. It's got a couple new jobs in it and the custom item rules. I think that'd be pretty much about it. I don't know. I mean, we could. I just don't know how useful it would be. I don't know if there's a whole lot there to talk about. But again, I do have a list of first looks. I want to get Ayla back on the show because I want to talk more about Forbidden Lands, especially now that Bob has kind of got some interest in it. And, I kind of brought it up and got people excited about it. There's still more there that I'd like to go over on the stream. So probably going to try to have Ayla back on this year if we can manage it. Yeah. Or maybe, just maybe, we could just do a stream and it would just be an hour long. That'd be sweet. All right, folks. Thank you so much. I will be back Thursday. I don't know what I'm covering. Maybe we'll do remaster. I don't know. I mean, look, No Net's putting out 25 videos. Rules Lawyer's putting out 25 videos. I mean, if you have the PDF, you have the PDF. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what people want me to say. I think we talked a little bit about this in the Patreon. But again, if you're not a patron, sign up. Patreon.com/9call. Link in the description below. Gets you access to our private Discord where you can yell at me and call me an idiot. But yeah, if there's something interesting for me to say about remaster, I'll say it. I mean, a lot of what I've said or have to say, it's already there, So, Ayla says she's down. Hope you guys get to play Forbidden Lands soon too. Yeah, I think it'll be a lot of fun. I think it'll be really, really, really fun. That is accurate. No one else is ranking all the spells, except they have this weird rule, right? Where they're like, I can't do it until the book is out because like Paizo has this thing where like, they're not letting people show more than like 2 or 3 pages or something of the PDF over the course of a stream or something. I think it's like the new rule because of what we did during the Treasure Vault stream. So, allegedly, I don't know. So we'll have to see. But yeah, thanks everybody for coming out. Thank you, Vin, for the extremely generous but infuriating super chat. Thank you to everybody else who tipped. and was trying to get us to do literally anything else. But again, Thursday, we might talk about remaster. We'll see what the people want to do, what they want to talk about. One of my most excited for in the Pathfinder 2nd Edition remaster. I mean, ideally, I would like to see if they could take what I consider to be the F and D tier classes and make them at least C tier. I think that would, if you're going to have all these classes in the game, I think they should all be compelling choices. And so I really want to see what they can, what they can pull out. Short of that, I would say within that space, there's a lot of terrible, horrible, garbage feats for a lot of classes that don't really do much of anything. And I would like to see those be more, I'd like to see cooler feats, for classes. So those are kind of the two main things. Other than that, I'm not hoping for too much, just sort of some basic stuff. So remains to be seen. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. And remember, roll for combat tomorrow if you're available. And we'll be back Thursday. And we'll see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Bye-bye.